Okay. Believe that recording has stopped. Okay. Started rather. Recording should have started. But let me just make sure. All right. We are good to go. We're recording, and this is our fifth lecture. And we last considered the, oops, whoops. Is everyone still there?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Yes.
All right, good. I think I almost switched off my Wi-Fi and went somewhere else. I'm sorry. Just trying to get the recording.
Well, it's
Okay, here we go. Now we're officially going. Good. All right. Lecture number 5. End of the Iliad. We saw the in the last lecture. We talked about how Hector, who is essentially the hero of the book, is facing Achilles and kind of reflecting on the fact that his life is now coming to an end. He's not going to survive the contest with Achilles. And the shield that Achilles is wearing shows the city of war and the city of peace. And this is sort of Hector's kind of like a Hector seeing his life flash before his eyes, I guess, something like that. The book 24, which is sort of the resolution, if you will, of the anger of Achilles. You know, the book begins with the anger of Achilles. And when does Achilles lose his anger? It's really when he allows the corpse of Hector to be returned to his family for burial. Is a scene that's often depicted on vases. Here's this this wonderful Greek vase, which shows you Achilles lying on a couch, and he is, he's holding a knife, and he's clearly a very young man. The underneath the couch where he is lying, there you go. You can see there's an older man with a beard who's much wounded, and that would be the body of Hector. And over here in the white beard and hair, you have old King Priam going to try to ransom the corpse back. And Achilles is looking away and holding a knife, thinking, "Oh, who is this guy who's sort of breaking in? Who is this old man?" And he is at first angry and startled, in very much the same way that Agamemnon was angry at the old priest who came into the ships in book 1 to ransom his daughter. So this is one of the many examples of what Homeric scholars have referred to as ring composition. The Iliad is like layers. It's like a sort of brackets. Things that happen in book 1 tend to recur in book 24. Themes, events, even language, they form a sort of a ring, and they sort of tie the story together. This is, possibly one of the ways that helps an oral poet maintain his or her focus and control over the story, because of course they're reciting for a long period of time and reciting a very complex tale. So the ring composition could be a sort of a mnemonic aid as well, but we tend to think of it as a stylistic aid. So let's go back into the death of Hector, and we'll see some of those stylistic.
Sorry, Professor, I think someone's in the waiting room.
Yes, I think I let them in. It was someone who was on their iPhone. I think I let them in. Is there everyone else is in? Yeah, I don't see anyone else in the waiting room right now. After a while we'll do attendance, but I think we have a pretty full crew tonight. All right. So Book 22 of the Iliad. Here is maybe the best example of ring composition. It's book 22 is the death scene of Hector, and it begins and ends with basically Hector's funeral, or the lamentation over Hector. Even though Hector isn't dead yet, it begins with his parents trying to persuade him not to go out to fight Achilles, right? Um, so Priam and Hecuba, right, his mother and father, um, see Achilles running in, looking like he's unstoppable, and they get very worried. So Priam first speaks to his son, saying, "Hector, dear child, I beg you, don't face that man alone. Seek help lest you meet your doom at the hands of Achilles, a stronger and tougher warrior than you." It seems like he's, not very encouraging to his son by kind of admitting you can't stand up to Achilles. But then again, everybody knows this. Achilles is sort of half god. You can't go out and fight him, right? So save your life, he's telling his son. Don't try. Priam continues, if the gods loved him, that is Achilles, as little as I do, then the dogs and the vultures would soon feed on his corpse, and my heart would be eased of a burden of sorrow, for he has robbed me of many fine sons, killing them or selling them on some far-off isle. This very day I miss my two sons, Lycaon and Polydorus. And then he talks about, his sons and not seeing them in the battlefield. If they're dead, he says, that is one more sorrow for their mother and I, who engendered them. But yet the people's mourning will be briefer, if Achilles fails to kill you too. So take refuge behind the walls, right? If you can stay away from Achilles, the Trojans will be less in anticipation that the city will be taken. There'll be less grief, even though there's a lot of grief already to go around. So he encourages his son, take refuge behind the walls, my child, and be the savior of the Trojans. Stay alive, deny this son of Peleus glory. Have pity on me too while I live, I, poor wretch, for whom it seems Father Zeus reserves a dreadful fate. Here, after much sorrowful experience, on the threshold of old age, to see my sons slaughtered, my daughters dishonored, their children hurled aside in anger, my sons' wives dragged away, my treasures fallen into savage Achaean hands. In the end, I shall be slain by a thrust from some sharp spear, and the flesh-eating dogs before my door will tear my corpse apart. The very dogs I fed from my table, reared to guard these same doors, dogs that will lie there in the gateway when in their savagery they've lapped my blood. It is fine for a young man killed in battle to lie there with his wounds on display, dead though he is. It is an honorable sight. But an old man's naked corpse, his gray hairs soiled by the dogs, is a pitiful matter for us wretched mortals. This notion that if you die young and you leave a beautiful corpse is it's almost obsessive in the Iliad. The figure of the corpse on the battlefield, and it's well represented on the vase that we just looked at a few minutes ago. The noble corpse, which in book 24 you will learn is should have been in much worse shape, but the gods have more or less conspired to keep the corpse looking as it did when it fell, when Hector was first killed. But this whole thing about the dogs is interesting. The dogs appear at the very beginning of the Iliad, and these are stray dogs that you would find, running around on the battlefield looking for things to eat. And if when corpses go unburied, the dogs will probably take bits of meat from the corpses. And this is the worst thing that Priam imagines could happen to anyone. And he fears that it's going to happen to Hector. That's always the threat. The threat is to leave the body unburied, right? Of course, in every culture, there's a premium placed on retrieving the war dead and giving them a proper burial and giving their families the opportunity to say their farewells and have closure, what have you. But in the Iliad, there's something very strange about the sort of the value almost of the corpses as leverage, as trading. They mimic in a way the way that the enslaved women are traded in book one. Chryseis has to be given back. Therefore, Briseis, who was taken by Achilles, now has to go to Agamemnon. And they're like pawns in the game. Um, they have value, right? And at the end of the Iliad, you have the corpse of Patroclus and the corpse of Hector, that are in a way they're objects of value. They're ransomed as if they were living people. So that's something that it strikes us as a little odd from our contemporary perspective. And the other thing is that the specific image of dogs here that are your own friendly dogs that you've raised are now going to sort of treat your body as just flesh, is just the most horrifying kind of image that Homer can imagine, and it resembles the kind of projection of thought that you see with Hector, right? Priam seems to have the same tendency to sort of look into the future to the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario for Hector in book 6, when he's talking to his wife, is that his wife will survive the war, but she'll be enslaved, and she'll have to remember her sorrow. The worst case scenario for Priam is that his city will be destroyed, and even his body will be just will be eaten by not stray dogs, by his own dogs. So one thinks about the identification also of the ruler and the body of the king. Virgil's Aeneid, when Aeneas reflects upon the fall of Troy, he very pointedly makes a point that Priam's body will be lying on the shore, decapitated, so that it won't even be recognized, right? And that, for Virgil, is kind of the signature. It's kind of the last line of the story for the destruction of Troy. Even the king, whom everybody should recognize, will now be nothing more than just another corpse on the battlefield. I mean, I'm dwelling on this image because it sort of ties together the two epics, the one that we're beginning the course with, the Iliad, and the one that we will read at the end of the course. So let me just let someone in there. So this is how the book begins. It begins first with Priam's prayer, encouragement that Hector not go out, and then he acts like he's at a funeral. He starts tearing the hair out of his head. Then his mother, Hector's mother, comes forward, and she gives her plea. She takes one of her breasts out of her robe, and she says, "This is the breast that nursed you. Have pity on me." A common gesture in ancient Greek culture of a mother's kind of appeal to a son, that if the son does not now protect her, she'll suffer a terrible fate. So Hecuba also says, not only me, your mother, but also your wife will have this fate. So Hector now is thinking, what should I do? And he has his moment, his sort of last temptation here, where the Hector that the character that has been built up for us in all these books, the great protector, the great husband, the great father, has a moment of weakness. Hector's waiting for Achilles to come, like a snake in the hills full of venom, due to the toxic herbs that it eats, that glares balefully and writhes inside its hole, waiting as some man approaches. So Hector held his ground, filled with latent power, his bright shield resting on a jutting outwork. He is described in an image that we would not necessarily see as a very positive one, a poisonous snake, um, because he's powerful but motionless. But his mind is active. His proud thoughts were troubled. He says, "Alas, if I retreat through the gates, if I go back into the city to the safety of the wall, Polydamas, my brother, one of the only surviving brothers, will not be slow to reproach me. He will not be slow to point out my deficits. Since he advised me to withdraw our forces to the city on that fatal night when Achilles reappeared." So Polydamas, because he knows the movements of the troops in Troy and he knows Hector's decisions, might call into question Hector's generalship, might call into question his leadership, right? Um, and Hector says, "Well, I refused to do that. I refused to pull back on that day, though it may have been better to do that. Now, in my folly, having brought us to the brink of ruin, I'd be ashamed to hear some insignificant Trojan or his long-robed wife say, 'Hector has brought ruin on the army, trusting too much in his own right arm, in his own personal strength.' Hector has been foolhardy, he's been foolish. If that's what they'll say, then it would be better by far for me to meet Achilles face to face, and then either kill or be killed by him." Right? Hector cannot stand the possible loss of his reputation. Right? He's supposed to be the protector of the city, the ultimate protector. Um, so hang on a second. No worries about we have lots of connection issues, and we'll get through them. Um, so And then comes this moment of weakness on the part of Hector. He says, "Of course, I could ditch the shield and the helmet and lean my spear on the wall and then just go unarmed and promise Achilles to return Helen and her treasure to the sons of Atreus, right? Give Helen back to Menelaus, and also give back all that Paris brought in the hollow ships to Troy. In other words, when Paris stole Helen from Greece, from Menelaus, he also took stuff. He took, gold and silver and what have you. So Hector says, I'll promise to give all that stuff back to Achilles, give it all back to the Greeks, right? I could also say, says Hector, that we'll then divide the remaining treasure of the city. In other words, what is he saying here? He's saying Hector is contemplating betraying the city, right? He's saying, you take half, Achilles, and we'll keep half, right? And then induce the elders of Troy to state on oath that they'll conceal no part of their treasure. They won't hide anything. In other words, throw the city gates open, let the Greeks plunder the place, and take half. Grant half of all that the lovely city holds. It is really striking from a narrative point of view that Homer allows us this deep inside the thoughts of this character. Um, this is treason, right? This is the absolute inversion of his character. And then he snaps out of it. He says, "But what's the point of such thoughts? I'm not going to approach him like a beggar, like a suppliant, only to show him, only to see that he has no mercy or respect, right? But he'll just kill me right out of hand and strip my armor off, defenseless, as if I were a woman, as if I were not capable of battle." He's saying, right? Of course, we have to sort of make peace with the fact that this is a very patriarchal society, a patriarchal view of women, and how women don't belong in battle. We don't hold that opinion as contemporary people, but certainly that was the standard opinion in Homeric times. In fact, when we look at we'll look at a vase in a little while of the death of Hector, and the women are always portrayed in they're painted in white, whereas the men are painted in black, and it's not it's not a change of color that reflects an ethnicity. It's the fact that the Greek women were never got any tan. They were always indoors, so their skin tone was always much lighter than the men's skin tone, who were always out of doors. It was very, sort of gender segregated in terms of who stays out of doors and who stays indoors. Um, so you know, but more about that as we talk about other texts, and as we see other female characters appear in other texts. But for here, the crucial thing is that Hector really has that moment of weakness, right? And again, this is kind of the opposite of narcissism. Someone who is willing psychologically to probe their own darkest places, right? Can I possibly become a traitor to my city and my family? And he says, no, can't do it, can't do it. And he pulls himself back by saying, this thing here between me and Achilles, this is no lover's tryst, right? This is no boy girl thing here, sort of some kind of puppy love or something. Lad and lass indeed. Like this is not Achilles and I are not meeting to have to show love to one another. Better to meet in bloody combat now and see to whom Zeus grants the glory. So the end is near for Hector, and Achilles comes up to him, and the first thing that happens is not something you might expect. Hector was actually gripped with fear and started running away, right? He runs away. Is he just in flight, like prey, in the sense of like Achilles is the predator and he's the prey? Or is he relying on speed as one other weapon? Maybe he's going to tire out Achilles. Someone had a hand raised. Go ahead, you can unmute.
I just had a quick question, Professor.
Yeah.
So when we talk about narcissism just in general, right? The definition is somebody who's obsessed or with admiration in themselves. So
Yeah.
if Hector is to the point of despair because he feels like he's going to lose honor or his reputation, how is that not narcissistic? How is Hector the anti-narcissistic hero here if he's constantly obsessed with the outcome of this battle, and more importantly, how he's portrayed? How is that not narcissism?
No, I understand. I understand exactly what you're saying, and it's an excellent point. When I think of narcissism as the kind of thing that consumes the personality, that makes it impossible for the narcissist to look outside of themselves and see any other point of view, right? I'm thinking of someone who is not capable of seeing different outcomes, different decision making. They're always fixed at one point of view, and it's themselves, right? What Hector is, it's true that Hector is motivated by glory, but he's not motivated by having everything go his own way. It's not like he's going to have the glory and the long life and the wealth and everything else. He already knows that he's basically fate is going to prevent him from having a long life and having a happy, wealthy life. So glory is kind of all that's left for him. And he kind of looks at the situation as not what I, Hector, see about myself, but what would other people say about me? Like, what would the city say about me? So in that sense, there's there's a more complex point of view to Hector than to someone like Agamemnon, right? So yes, someone has their hand up. Is that Louis again? Louis? No.
No, I think I'm talking enough.
Okay. It was very good point. Very good point.
But Professor, just real quick. So is it fair to say? I mean, because it sounds like, and I don't want to be too vulgar here, but it sounds like we shit on Achilles all the time for being narcissistic because he wants glory. He wants the same thing as Hector. Maybe not on the same level, but we do see Achilles fighting for the war. It's not all personal gain, right? I mean, he's doing it for his achievements. He's doing it for his country. So why do we constantly, again, for lack of a better word, shit on Achilles all the time, and then make out Hector to be this great person who is just honorable all the way through?
Well, I mean, again, this may be something that's just, you know, my own point of view, but it seems to sort of come to me every time I see the you know, I read through the story again. You have in Achilles someone who withdraws from the battle and brings, you know, allows the great suffering to come to his friends and the entire army. Whereas in Hector, you have someone who it's only now in this one moment of weakness who is thinking about the possibility of not, you know, putting up the best possible fight, right? It's the it's like it's almost forgivable for someone to have that sort of doubt, you know. It's like, well, maybe I'll just, you know, save myself, right? Maybe I'll save myself, and heck, if it costs, like, you know, giving up the whole city, at least I've saved myself. It's right in this moment of self-doubt, maybe, that Hector is the great narcissist, right? Because he's thinking purely of his own gain, but he snaps out of it, right? Whereas Achilles can go on for days and days, thinking, well, you know, this you know, the war doesn't have any connection to me. We only came here because, you know, we made a promise to Agamemnon and Menelaus, and you know, I'm gonna let the Trojans roll over everybody. So, but it's a good point, you know, and I do welcome that, you know, it's good. It's good to see a different perspective. So again, Hector is now chasing. Sorry, Achilles is chasing Hector around the walls, and it seems like they might just go on like this forever. Of course, it's, you know, it's like it's almost like an artistic representation of a chase and an audience, and the simile is, you know, like a sort of maybe a vase painting. They're almost like running for a contest, but in fact, you know, Hector is running for his life, but he's running around this. He's not running away. So it may be just that he's trying to tire out Achilles, but at some point, something has to give. And Athena says to Zeus, "Why are we letting it go on so long?" And Zeus said, "Well, all right, you can go and sort of break the ice here in this weird kind of running race." So Athena goes down and she disguises herself as one of the minor brothers that Hector has, Deiphobus, and Deiphobus, you know, stands by Hector and says, "Okay, so stop running, and I will help you with Achilles, right? I'll be, you know, we'll be two against one." And he says, Athena, in the guise of this character Deiphobus, says, "Dear brother, swift Achilles presses you hard there, chasing you around the city at a pace, but here let us make a stand together and defend ourselves." And Hector is encouraged. He replies, "Deiphobus, of all my brothers, you are by far the dearest." And he's a full brother, born of Hecuba and Priam, right? He's Hector's full brother. And now I'll honor you in my mind even more, since while the others stay inside in the city and watch, you have come outside. There's always more and more, it seems, of these sons of Priam. You know, we think that they're all gone and Achilles has killed all of them, but it seems like, you know, he has always a couple of minor ones out there, and Deiphobus comes into the story kind of out of nowhere. So it doesn't seem disgraceful or unfair for it to be 2 against 1, I guess, because Achilles really is sort of a godlike figure. And so Deiphobus and Hector standing together doesn't seem like, it doesn't faze Achilles. But things are bad because Athena, of course, is going to just vanish. And Hector stands there and he says, "Uh-oh, I'm not going to run from you the way I did before. At first, I was afraid, waiting for your attack, and 3 times we ran around the wall. But now, we have to stand our ground and see who is going to win." But Hector says, "If Zeus lets me kill you and lets me survive, then when I've stripped you of your armor, I promise I will not mistreat your corpse. I'll return your body to your people and promise that you'll do the same for me." And Achilles replies to him, "No way. We're not even going to talk about any deals." He says, "Curse you, Hector. Don't talk of oaths to me. Lions and men make no compacts, nor are wolves and lambs in sympathy. They are opposed to the end. You and I are beyond friendship, nor will there be peace between us till one or the other dies and sates and satisfies Ares, the war god, lord of the ox-hide shield, with his blood. Summon up your reserves of courage, be a spearman now, be brave, there is no escaping from me. For soon Athena will bring you down with my spear." So Athena is on Achilles' side, and Achilles seems to sense that. This is one of the indications that Achilles has kind of a line in with the gods. He Hector didn't know that he was being fooled by Athena when Athena disguised herself as his brother Deiphobus, and then disappears at the last minute at the crucial moment. Hector doesn't seem to know that, but Achilles does, right? He says, "Okay, so Athena's is helping me in this situation here." Um, so yeah, Hector is fated to lose, and Troy is fated to fall, and Achilles is fated to die afterwards. So hang on a second. Close up this. All right, just close up this thing here. So all right. So he strikes Hector, and the thing that really is visually quite compelling. I see a couple of people are raising their hand in the chat. So, who creates you mean the fates of men?
Yeah.
So in the folklore and the mythology, there are 3 women, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atrophos, they're called, who are in charge of doling out the life of mankind, right? They're probably sort of like fairy tale figures, but they sort of pop into the literature. And the idea is that every time when a baby is born, they spin out a length of wool, and they tie up a knot, which represents like, this is how far the life is going to go. It's not going to go any further, and that
So
can't be untied.
basically,
Say again.
they create the future.
Yes, everything in one reading of Greek mythology is all laid out. It's all there's no deviation. It doesn't always come to the surface all the time. It doesn't always figure in the stories, but that's kind of like part of the folk myth that has come down to us. So in a sense, all of these heroes, know that whatever they do, it's been foreordained, but they don't want to do anything that's disgraceful.
Is there is there this idea in Greek mythology that everything is already written?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, certainly the span of life for everyone is written. The way that people conduct themselves is perhaps variable, and how they face their fate is variable. But they, the sort of the major episodes of life are fixed. I mean, you see that in the story of Oedipus. We'll read the story of Oedipus in a couple of weeks. But let me sort of finish up with book 22, because I just want to show you the ring composition. So Achilles is now going to deliver the final blow, and what armor is Hector wearing? Well, he's wearing Achilles' armor, right? Hector is wearing the armor that Achilles used to own and knows very well, and was warned by Patroclus when Patroclus went out impersonating Achilles, right? So Hector kills Patroclus, takes the armor from him, but instead of taking the armor and bringing it back to a temple of Apollo in Troy, let's say, and dedicating it to the god, which would be like the normal thing to do, he actually puts on the armor himself. He almost wants to sort of get some of the mojo of Achilles, from the armor into himself. So he's actually dressed like Achilles. Achilles knows the weak points of the armor. So he sees that there's an opening where the collarbones knit neck and shoulders, and violent death may come most swiftly. So as Hector charged at Achilles, Achilles aimed his spear and drove through the neck. So he makes use of his knowledge of this weak point in the armor, this flaw, if you will. So he cuts Hector's, carotid artery, though without cutting the windpipe or robbing Hector of the power of speech. Hector fell to the dust, and Achilles shouted in triumph over Hector, the quickly dying Hector. He says, while you were despoiling Patroclus, while he was stealing the arms off Patroclus, no doubt in your folly, you thought that you'd be quite safe, Hector, and you forgot all about me in my absence. Far from him, here by the hollow ships, was a mightier man who should have been his helper, but stayed behind. Achilles is kind of like hating on himself for not getting into the battle and allowing Patroclus to die. And that was I. The more powerful man was I, who have now brought you low. The dogs and the carrion birds will tear apart your flesh, but him, Patroclus, the Achaeans will bury. So as Hector is dying, Achilles makes it even worse for him. He makes Hector feel even worse, because he says, your body is going to be left to be eaten by the dogs. Just like, this terrible fear that your father had would happen to himself. But Patroclus, he's going to get the honorable burial, right? And Hector is about to die, and his last words are, at your feet I beg you, by your parents, by your own life, don't let the dogs devour my flesh by the hollow ship. Accept the royal ransom that my father and mother will offer you, gold and bronze. Let them carry my body back home, so that the Trojans and their wives may grant me in death my portion of fire, so that they can put me on a funeral pyre, cremate me like a hero. But fleet-footed Achilles glared at him in answer. Don't speak of my parents, dog. I wish the fury and the pain in me could drive me to carve and eat you raw for what you did in killing Patroclus. As surely as this is true, no living man will keep the dogs from gnawing at your skull, not even if men weighed out 20 or 30 times your worth in ransom and promised even more. Not though Dardanian Priam bid them give your weight in gold. Not even then will your royal mother lay you on a bier on a funeral pyre to grieve for you, the son that she bore. Nope, the dogs and the vultures, the carrion birds, will devour you utterly. So he is, Achilles is saying, well, when it comes to you and me, I'm just going to go back, and I'm just like Agamemnon, right? My desire to mistreat your body and prevent you from having a funeral, Hector, is very much like the desire of Agamemnon to retain his prize, Chryseis, at all costs, right? It's almost like, just the way Agamemnon was dishonored in book one, now I'm going to make sure that I'm not dishonored here, right? It's a madness. It's what the Greek called an ate, right? It's an obsession. So again, in terms of narcissism, you might see Achilles now lapsing into a kind of narcissism, right? He is obsessed with the honor that's going to come to him from desecrating the corpse of Hector. It doesn't seem to me that he should have a good reason to believe that people are going to honor him for doing this, right? The Trojans will be suffering, to be sure, and that makes Achilles basically sort of a sadist, but the Greeks are not going to praise him for doing it, right? Only he himself in his own mind will get any joy out of it, because he thinks that that this is the only way that he can make up to Patroclus, to the dead Patroclus, the fact that Achilles wasn't there to help him, right? And it will take in book 23, we'll sort of gloss over book 23 very quickly, but Patroclus's spirit actually comes back to Achilles and says, you know what, you did me honor. Don't beat yourself up over it. You did me honor in the way you've treated, the funeral that you gave me. Book 23 is a funeral of Patroclus, and it involves games. First is the traditional mourning, the lamentation, but then Achilles is the host of athletic contests, which is traditional for Homeric warriors. And Achilles has to give out the prizes. He has to set the prizes, and he has to be the judge. And at the very end of these contests, they have a javelin competition, and Achilles, this is very end of the next book, book 23, Achilles sees Agamemnon stand up to compete. And when Achilles sees Agamemnon stand up, he says, well, wait a minute now, we can't go back. We can't go back and do the whole Iliad again and do the whole, Agamemnon being dishonored bit. So Achilles says, you just take the prize, Agamemnon. You just take, but we're going to say that you won. We won't even go through the motions of having the contest. We're going to say that you won, right? So in the end of book 23, Achilles is starting to sort of come out of this funk, this ate, this obsession, this narcissistic obsession, that he just needs the body of Hector to mistreat. If you were Achilles, you'd be more angry at Patroclus than at Hector. Why is that?
Then Patroclus tried to become Achilles. He was like, he stole his armor and stuff.
Well, I mean, maybe not stole, borrowed, because Achilles allowed him to do it. But the whole, it was because Patroclus felt so bad that the Greeks were suffering, and he thought, if I just go out there, looking like Achilles, the soldiers will rally. They'll get pumped, right? And Achilles said, well, you do that if you really feel like doing that. Do that, but don't take the battle too far. Just go out there enough to get the Greeks pumped up and drive back the Trojans, but don't go trying to take the city, right? And Patroclus does make the mistake that he takes it too far, that he starts to feel sort of invincible.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He didn't listen to Achilles. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, he maybe he didn't read Patroclus's ambition well enough. Maybe everyone has that sort of strong ambition. So someone has the gods are definitely against honor. So yeah, I mean, the gods don't seem to be concerned with someone sort of showing that they're the best. They're kind of concerned that their own favorites win, right? I mean, if they happen to have a favorite on one side or the other. So yeah. So okay. Yeah, there's definitely yep. So as we wrap up this, and we'll take a break in a minute, but just Achilles now drags the corpse of Hector. Well, let me just backtrack a second. Achilles is, we're not going to have any kind of agreement here. You're going to be left out to be devoured by the birds and the dogs. And Hector, his last statement is, well, now I understand finally the sort of person you are, and it was not going to be possible for me to sway you, to move you. The heart in your breast is iron indeed. Exactly the same words that Patroclus used for Achilles in book 18. It's like, you are made of iron, you're made of granite, you are like not flesh and blood, right? So in this kind of condition, Achilles cannot really partake in human society, right? And again, in book 23, the next book in the funeral, he actually performs human sacrifice. He actually takes some of the Trojan captives and kills them on the funeral pyre for Patroclus. So when Hector finally dies, Achilles takes the corpse and he pierces between the ankle and the foot, basically the Achilles heel. Of course, we all know what an Achilles heel is. The Achilles tendon is where he pierces the corpse of Hector, and he ties leather straps around there, and he drags the body around. And he, you would imagine that the body would have been very much torn up by being dragged around the city. So in the ring composition, 3 times in life, Hector runs around the city trying to escape Achilles. 3 times in death, Achilles drags the dead body around the city. So it's this, what happens at the beginning is mirrored at the end of the book. So there's like layer within layer within layer. This is the sort of ring composition that I was talking about. And then at the end of the book, you have kind of a preliminary funeral. It's a funeral without a body. Achilles still has the body, but the same characters speak. First Hector, first Hector's father, Priam speaks, then Hector's mother, Hecuba speaks, and then Hector's wife, Andromache, comes in, and she actually faints when she hears that he's been killed. And so what happens at the beginning of the book with kind of the warnings against facing Achilles now happens at the end. We said this was going to happen. His parents say, and now all of the things that we thought would, all of the disasters and misfortunes are going to come. And Andromache gets the last sort of scene here. She worries about her little child, Hector's son. So my child will run in tears to his widowed mother, my son Astyanax, who sat on his father's knee, eating the rich fat and sheep's marrow when he was sleepy and tired of play. And he slept in his nurse's arms in a soft bed, his dreams sweet. But now with his dear father gone, ills will crowd around him. Astyanax, that is, lord of the city. Astyanax in Greek means lord of the city. Astu means city, and anax is lord. As the Trojans called him, since you, Hector, were the great defender of the gates of and now, by the beaked ships, far from your kin, the writhing worms will devour your corpse once the dogs have had their fill. Your naked corpse, though in your house, are all the finely woven cloths that women's hands can fashion. All those I will burn in a great fire, since you will no more wear a profit by them as a mark of honor shown you by the men and women of Troy. And so her lament is once again reflecting on the fact that the corpse is being mistreated. So yeah, okay, we're gonna now take a bit of a break. It's 9:08. Let's come back at like 9:15, and we will look at book 24. And I think that's where we're headed for tonight. We're going to be looking at the end of the Iliad. We'll save the Odyssey for next time. Okay, 9:08. So we're shooting for 9:15, right? All right. Pausing the recording, and also, hello everybody. I was a couple of minutes late. I'm sorry about that. Trying to get my voice back. All right. Book 24, the last book. And again, the notion of ring composition. Book 23 is something we just have to skip for the sake of time, but one day, hopefully we'll go back and look at it. Book 24 is so much like book 1. But it begins in a way that is a little different. So Hector's body has become a character in itself. After the funeral games for Patroclus, the men scattered and went to sleep. But Achilles was weeping, and he regretted, that Patroclus had gone on too far, and he's remembering all the good times they had, and what have you. And the the anger that Achilles feels towards the body of Hector makes him want to just do more and more damage to it, but the gods are taking pity on the body, right? So 11 days go by, 11 days of mistreatment of the body, and then Apollo says, this has to come to an end. So Apollo, who starts the plague in book 1, now comes in as healer, right? Apollo is sort of the god of healing and the god of disease. So here he is the healer. After 11 days, on the 12th dawn, Apollo addressed them all. Harsh and cruel you are, you immortals. Did Hector not burn the thighs of unblemished bulls and goats for you? And yet you have not the decency, now that he's dead, to rescue his corpse for his wife, his mother, his child to watch over, nor for his father Priam and his friends, who might then swiftly give him to the fires and enact the funeral rites. The priest of Apollo, Chryses, in book 1, begs for his daughter by addressing Apollo, saying, did I not burn the thighs of animals for you? And here is Apollo telling the gods, did Hector not do these things for you, right? So Hector is like, I mean, it's probably not useful to think of Hector in the position of the priest, Chryses, in book 1, but in a sense, you really get the sense of how compelling this balancing act is, this ring composition, right? So Apollo continues, you would rather help this brute Achilles, whose mind is warped, his will of adamant. The man's heart is like a lion's, wild and powerful. Is that creatures in it to urge to slaughter the shepherd's flocks for meat. Achilles is as devoid of pity and of the shame that benefits men, urging restraint. Many a man loses someone closer to him than this, maybe a brother born of one mother, or maybe a son, and yet when he has finished the weeping and wailing, he is done, since the fates grant, he finishes weeping, right? But because the fates have granted men endurance, even as they condition and limit their life, they give them suffering, and they give them endurance. They allow them to get through these tragedies. But this man, says Apollo, having robbed Hector of his life, ties him to his chariot and drags him round his dead friend's burial mound, as if that brought him honor or profit. Great as he is, let him be wary of our wrath, not to disfigure the mute clay in his fury. So finally, the gods sort of appeal to men, or Apollo does at any rate. Apollo reminds the gods of the importance for men to be virtuous, right? He doesn't take it for granted that the gods are virtuous. He says the gods are acting, quite shamefully here. But Achilles is clearly, he has to go back to being a God-fearing human, and Hera spoke up, and he says, well, that might make sense, Apollo, if the gods valued Hector as highly as Achilles, but Hector was a mere mortal. He was raised by a woman. But while Achilles is a child to a goddess, I nurtured his mother and reared her myself and gave her in marriage to Peleus, etc. And all of you gods were at that wedding. So, Hera as well. There's a reason why, we favor Achilles, because he's like us. And then Zeus comes in to sort of put his final stamp on, things here. And hang on a second. It's just so hard for me to navigate the chat and go through the text. So Zeus says, Hera, curb your anger against us. These men will not be honored equally. Yet of all the mortals in Ilium, Hector was the dearest to the gods. At least he was so to me, never failing in his gifts towards me. My altar never lacked for sacrifice, for a share of all his meat and drink, the offerings that are our privilege. But no talk now of stealing brave Hector's corpse, for Achilles would hear of it from his mother, who visits him night and day. Better for one of you to summon Achilles' mother Thetis to me, so I may advise her wisely to have Achilles accept a ransom and give Hector's body back to Priam. So Thetis, Achilles' mother, appears in book 24 as she appeared in book 1. In book 1, she appeared to hear Achilles complain against Agamemnon. Achilles is there by the seashore, and Thetis is saying, tell me, dear boy, what have the poor Greeks done to you now? And here Thetis comes in as to get Achilles to relent, right? So Achilles is like Agamemnon in book 1, right? It's like Thetis has to come in and say, Achilles, don't be as stubborn as Agamemnon in wanting to hang on to this corpse the way Agamemnon wanted to hang on to his prize. So Thetis persuades Achilles, or tries to, and Achilles kind of says, well, I knew, I've already come to that decision, right? I know what the gods want. If such be the Olympians' wish, then let it be so, right? Whoever brings fit ransom may take away the dead. And Achilles kind of begrudgingly relents. And then what's set into motion now is a recap of book 1. The priest in book 1 goes to the king. Priam here goes to Achilles, right? The old poor man goes to Achilles, and he makes his claim for the body, for ransom. Says, I'm bringing on this ransom. He has to kind of go through, Priam has to go get through the Greek camps sort of secretly. The gods help him do that. But and his wife, Priam's wife, Hecuba, says, don't do this. But the gods are all on Priam's side. They want to see this happen. They want to see resolution. And Hermes helps guide Priam to Achilles' particular hut. So when Achilles is just sort of there with his friends, all of a sudden this old man just kind of shows up, right? The old king went straight to the hut frequented by Achilles. He found him there with only one warrior, Automedon, and then his friend Alcimus by his side. So Achilles is there. Everyone's just doing normal household things, busying themselves with getting the food ready, and Achilles is not expecting anything unusual. The table was there with food on it, and all of a sudden pops in this old man, this gray-haired old man, Priam. Like, where did he come from? How did he get in? And he reached Achilles, and he clasped his knees, and he kissed his hands, the fearful man-killing hands that had slaughtered so many of his sons. And Achilles was astonished by the sight of Priam, as were his friends, and they stared at each other as like, how did this happen? But Priam was already talking. He was already entreating Achilles. He said, God like Achilles, what's the first thing he says? Think of your own father, who is my generation, and so is likewise on the sad threshold of old age. Perhaps his neighbors are troubling him, and there is no one to protect him from harm or ward off his ruin. But he at last can rejoice in the knowledge that you, Achilles, are still alive, and each day brings the hope of seeing you return from Troy, while I am a victim of sad fate. Of the best of my sons, the best in all Troy, no, not one is left. 50 sons I had when you Greeks landed, 19 by the one wife and the rest by other ladies of my court. Most of them have fallen in furious battle, and the defender of the city and its people, my prime recourse, Hector, you have killed as he fought for his country. I come now to the ships to beg his corpse from you, bringing a princely ransom. Princely ransom is the phrase that was used, aperesia poina. A boundless ransom was the phrase that was used by Chryses in book 1. So respect the gods, Achilles, and show mercy towards me, remembering your own father. For I am more to be pitied than he, since I have brought myself to do what no other man on earth would do. I have lifted my lips to the hand of the man who killed my sons. I've kissed the hands of the man who killed my sons, right? And these words move Achilles. So Achilles is brought back to humanity, if you will, by this speech, by the reflection that he is not going to see his own father because he's fated not to return from Troy, even though Prime, sort of alludes to the fact that, Peleus may have, some hope that you'll come back, but, Achilles is kind of, he knows it's not going to happen. So his father is aging back in Greece in Phthia. And here's this old man who is very much like his father, and that's what moves him, right? So he moved Achilles to tears. And taking the old man's hands, he set him gently from him while both were lost in memory. Priam was remembering Hector and wept aloud at Achilles' feet, while Achilles wept for his father Peleus and for Patroclus once more, and the sound of their lamentation filled the hut. So the two men now together are crying for their losses. And it's very much like Achilles seems to have found a sort of a surrogate father in Priam, and Priam has sort of found a surrogate son in Achilles, right? Now the father is childless, and so he's not really a father, and Achilles is sort of fatherless, so in a sense he's no longer a child. But when Achilles finished with his weeping and the force of grief was spent, he rose from his chair and he raised the old king by his arm, and he took pity on the old king and spoke eloquently to him. Achilles says to Priam, "You are indeed unfortunate, and your heart has endured much sorrow. Surely, though, there is iron in your spirit, daring to come alone to our ships and face the man who slew so many of your noble sons." Like, he's amazed at this. It's like, this is beyond human ability to have done what you did, Priam. But this is now the notion that a person is made of iron has always been used as a kind of a reproach, a blame, but now it's used as by Achilles as almost like admiration, because Achilles himself now seems no longer to be made of iron. It's like, he's thawing, he's softening. Achilles says, "Come, sit here, we will share our sorrows despite our grief, since there is but cold comfort in lament. The gods have spun the thread of fate for wretched mortals. We live in sorrow while they are free from care." Two vases, two urns, Achilles says, he uses this image. Two vases stand in front of Zeus's palace, containing the experience that he grants to mortals. In one vase there are blessings, and the other vase has misfortunes, ills. Some people receive a mixture of the two, and they meet with a little good and a little ill, fortune, misfortune. But then some people, the thunderer Zeus only serves from the jar of misfortune, and they might become an outcast and wander over the earth, honored neither by gods nor men. So the gods never give anyone pure happiness, says Achilles, right? It's either a mixture or it's just sheer unhappiness. And Achilles thinks back on his own father, Peleus. "See how the gods showered glorious gifts on my father Peleus from the moment of his birth, wealth and possessions beyond other men, kingship of the Myrmidons. And although he's but a mortal man, they gave him a goddess for a wife. Yet some god brought evil even to him. No crowd of princes, but an only son doomed to an untimely end." Right? You, Priam, had many, many children. My father Peleus had only one son. So both of these older men are bound to lose all of their children. And Achilles then continues, "And you, my aged lord, you Priam, they say you were once happy, renowned for your wealth and all of your sons, in all the lands from the Isle of Lesbos, where Makar reigned, through Upper Phrygia, to the boundless Hellespont. In this whole region, in the really it's the northwest corner of Turkey, where the Black Sea empties into the Mediterranean, right? This whole region knew your wealth. But from the moment that the heavenly gods brought this wretched war upon you, all has turned to battle and slaughter. Endure, let your heart not grieve forever. Sorrowing for your son will achieve nothing. You'll not bring him back to life, though life will bring you other sorrows. So Achilles is trying to sort of encourage, in some way, Priam, but Priam does not want to indulge in any further kind of discussion. He's fixated on getting the body of Hector back. Do not ask me to sit down, beloved of Zeus, replied Priam to Achilles. Don't ask me to sit down while Hector's corpse lies neglected by the huts, but give him back to me, so my eyes can gaze upon him, and then you accept the ransom, this princely ransom that I bring. May you have joy of it and return to your native land, since you have shown me mercy from the first. Very ironic thing to say to Achilles. You have shown me mercy from the first moment of my entering your hut now, but certainly all the moments before that, with the slaughter of all his children, was hardly merciful. And Achilles is not completely thawed out. He still has a bit of iron left in him, because he frowns and says, I need no urging, old man. I have decided to return Hector's body to you. I've already decided. My own mother, Thetis, the daughter of the old man of the sea, brought me a message from Zeus, and Zeus has made it clear that he wants this to happen. And I know in my heart, such things don't escape me, that some god led you to our swift ships. I know that this is the plan. No mortal man would have dared to do this, so don't overplay your hand, Priam. Don't try to move my heart further, lest I defy Zeus's command and choose, suppliant though you are, not to spare you. So Achilles has in him the way that Hector had that momentary lapse, right? Maybe I'll just save my life, right? That flaw in Hector's armor, if you will. Achilles, even while he's thawing and becoming more of a human, he has this sort of animalistic part of his nature. You could call it animalistic, you could call it, divine, but it's not human, right? It's the idea that even if he knows that that he's operating against the gods and operating against everything, he will do what his will compels him to do rather than what has to be done, right? He actually would think of even defying Zeus. And this causes Priam to be, just, oh my God, he's just gripped with fear. It's like, how, after this exchange of, tears and this lamentation that they shared, how can Achilles show such savagery? Just momentarily, the savage Achilles comes back. But Peleus goes out and tells his friends to take care of the body of Hector so that they can get it back. And luckily for Achilles, luckily for everybody, the gods have taken care of the body. So it doesn't, it looks like it was just killed, even though many, many days have passed. More than 12 days have passed. Achilles summoned 2 servant girls to wash the body and bring it to a place where Priam could not see his son, lest his grief at the sight provoke his anger. Like, Priam might take a look at the body unwrapped, right? And might get angry. And then Achilles might be angered in reply and kill Priam in defiance of Zeus's command. So Achilles at least knows that he has to put checks and balances to himself because of this streak of sort of bestial fury that comes out. It's like, I got to make sure that I don't give Priam a chance to get angry with me, because then I'll kill him, and then I'll be going against Zeus. So this has to be done without Priam's looking, right? And then he talks to Patroclus. He says, Patroclus, don't be angered. If even in the underworld, the house of Hades, you learn that I've returned the body to your son. Even of that you shall have your rightful share. It's like, I will take the ransom that Priam gives me, and I will in some way dedicate it to you as well. And so Achilles comes back in, says to Priam, your son now is ready for you to bring him back home. And you may look upon him at dawn. It's dark now. This is a nighttime scene. Then you can carry him back. But for now, since it's late, Achilles says to Priam, let's eat, because even those who are most miserable have to eat. And he tells the story of Niobe. Niobe is an interesting mythological character. She had 12 children, 6 daughters and 6 sons. And as Ovid tells the story, she bragged about her fertility. In many cultures, of course, fertility is a point of honor. And Hera and Leto and the goddesses of Olympus heard this, and so Niobe said, "Oh, the goddess Leto has only 2 children. She has Artemis and Apollo. I have 12. I have, 6 sons and 6 daughters." So Leto is offended, and she says to her 2 children, Artemis and Apollo, who are of course 2 of the important Olympian gods, that they should go and slay and kill all of the children of Niobe. And so Apollo kills the 6 boys with his arrows, and Artemis kills the 6 girls. And the mother, Niobe, becomes so engulfed in her grief that she turns into stone. And now Achilles says you can see her. She's a rock on the slopes of Mount Sipylus in Asia Minor in Turkey, and she has a sort of a water, she's a spring, like a natural spring water is coming out of this rock, and they point to her and they say that's Niobe, who has lost all of her children. So this is all an elaborate kind of myth of how even the rocks and the granite are moved to tears, right, in Greek mythology. So Achilles says, just as Niobe lost all of her children and still remember to eat, you must sit and have a meal with me. Yeah, it's a peculiar thing. The last interaction there between Achilles and Priam is that Achilles will arrange will call a truce, right? And he says, Priam says, well, allow me time to bury Hector. We will lament him 9 days in the palace and carry the funeral rites out on the 10th. And on the 11th day, we'll raise his funeral mound and the people will feast. And if we must fight, then we'll fight again on the 12th. And Achilles says, okay, we'll agree to that truce. So Priam returns with the body, and there is a kind of lament for Hector. And this ends the Iliad. Once again, the ring composition, each of the women that we've heard from before praising Hector now have their turn at mourning him. First, his mother Hecuba, Hector, dearest of all my children, she does her lament. And then Helen, who says, dearest to me of all my Trojan brothers, even though I brought such great grief on your city, Helen says, oh, Hector, you were the one who protected me the best, and you had a soft spot for me. And so it ends then with the funeral of Hector, and such were the funeral rites of Hector, tamer of horses. They raise, the funeral procedure is described, and it's with the burial of the body, and the cremation of the body and the burial of the remains, burial of the ashes, that the Iliad ends. So the anger which began the Iliad, the anger of Achilles, is resolved in the funeral of Hector. So the major sort of overarching ring composition is the anger, and it's not maybe 100% resolved, because Achilles' anger towards Agamemnon is sort of white hot in book 1, and at the end, book 24, when he relents and finally sort of completes his mourning for Patroclus. He says to the ghost of Patroclus, don't hold it against me. We've got to put this to an end. Or we've got to close this chapter. Achilles in the end still retains some bit of his sort of steeliness, right? So we have we've given a good sort of once over to the major books of the Iliad, and the value of doing that, I think, is that you will see how often these themes recur in the other things that we look at over the course of the next few weeks. And as we try to hold on to a little thread, just as one of the several things that we discussed, this thread of narcissism and the development of narcissism, it's a process of discovery for me, because I'm trying to sort of work out in my own head just how strong a sequence of unfolding we can have in the Greek view of narcissism, and self-awareness, and the ultimate narcissist in Greek culture is the figure of the tyrant who has absolute power over his city, the tyrant who is only interested in his own well-being, who sacrifices everything to his own well-being, who cannot see outside of himself, who cannot criticize himself in any way. So the figure of the tyrant is like the pure narcissist. And my question is, do we see that figure beginning to grow, the seeds of that figure beginning to grow in the Iliad? And we see bits of it in Achilles, but it's not fully unfolded, and we see certainly lots of it in Agamemnon. And then we see, in Hector, we see a character for, we see it's the anti-narcissist, the anti-tyrant. Hector, actually, it's probably a good way to define Hector as the anti-tyrant. He is the most legitimate ruler one could imagine, right? He is the ruler who is legitimately in his place as the prince, the eldest son of Troy, and none of the people doubt that. None of the people rise up and say, "Hey, you're not entitled to be where you are." Yet his whole being is devoted to the protection of the city at the cost of his own life. And it's only that one little moment where he shows the possibility of maybe acting treacherously and giving up the city. So it's the flaw in the perfect work of art. There's always maybe a little flaw, which reminds you of just how good that art is. His character has the little flaw, which reminds you of how sterling his character is. Okay, I've talked at you a lot tonight. We didn't get a chance to do breakout rooms tonight. We will next time. I wish you all a good night, and I will, as always, put this up on the web, on the blog tomorrow. Okay.
Hi, Professor. Did you
have
get
a good
me
weekend.
attendance? Because
Have a good
my
weekend.
internet was going in and out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
It's Joseph, by the way.
Yes, I see. I see it lit up
Yeah.
there.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Also, Professor,
Hi, Professor. Oh, sorry.
I'll hang back if you have questions. No, go ahead.
Did you take my attendance?
Good night, Professor.
Yes, I'm going to take the attendance from the chat. Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, not from the chat. Yeah, from the as people sign off, I'll take your attendance. Okay. Thank you.
hey, Professor, it's Louis. I had to get on my iPhone
Yeah.
because they're doing a little bit of maintenance on my internet. I
hear
know
you.
I don't have the same. I just hope you took my attendance because I was here
I
tonight.
did. No, I have you. And if you missed chunks of what we did, you can go ahead and look at it. It'll be online tomorrow. Okay.
My dad, I was here for the whole thing. I also sent you an email. I'm the guy who asked for the Zoom session.
Yes, that's right. I'm sorry we couldn't connect, but
It's absolutely fine.
yeah.
I just so I've been doing the notes since day one. I haven't sent any of the notes in or any of the prompt essays in simply because I was gonna send you 3 at once and 3 at once.
Okay.
As not to, send you one at a time. I don't know if
Okay.
that's annoying or maybe efficient.
That's fine.
Cool.
Do
Thank you
whatever
so
works
much.
best. Do whatever works best. All right.
I appreciate you. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
All right. Take care. Have a good night.
Bye-bye. You
Bye-bye.
too.
Professor, could I ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
So would you say that Agamemnon would be the tyrant in that situation and throughout those books
So he has
because of Hector's flaws?
legitimate claims to be the sort of the commander of the army. But he's the wealthiest of the kings. His brother is the aggrieved party. He holds the scepter of Zeus. But he doesn't have a direct command. Like he cannot command Achilles' people, the Myrmidons, right? He only can command his own people.
Right, but when we spoke about like tyranny,
Yeah.
are we speaking more in the broader sense of his character traits or sort of his commanding edge over the people?
Well, yeah, no,
in a narcissistic sense as well.
We have to look at politically, in what sense is he a tyrant, and in terms of his character, he does relent at one point. It's a kind of a soft relent in book 9 where he says, okay, we really need Achilles. I'm going to give over all of this stuff to him, but Achilles has to remember that I'm the boss, right? And that's kind of, that's not exactly what a tyrant would really do. A tyrant would want to try at all costs to eliminate any kind of competition, right? I mean, so there's, he's a weak tyrant. He's like a weak tyrant. He's got one foot in tyranny, and then the other foot in sort of traditional rule. He's called basileus, which is like the standard word for king. He's not, the word tyrant isn't applied to him in the Iliad. It's really
Right.
it's really kind of a question if because tyrant is not originally a Greek word. The word tyrannos is a loan word. We're not quite sure which language it originated in, but probably a Near Eastern language, or a language from Asia Minor. Maybe it's Phrygian, maybe it's Lydian,
Right.
but it's definitely kind of a foreign concept, because the Greeks were used to having kings, legitimate kings, where everybody recognized their authority, but the kings always had some kind of limitation. They couldn't sort of raid people's wealth, and they didn't have absolute autocratic control. So
Also, are the flaws that we saw throughout these books, is that normal of like classical culture?
so like, give me an example. What do you mean?
Like, I mean, we saw like imperfect characters. I mean, I always saw the classics as more of these like perfect beings. Not every character, but
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, I would say that the only perfection that you see is
it's through the goddess.
is the gods' eternal life and their indestructibility, but their decision making is if anything, it seems pretty much below the level of the human. So, and in fact, there's that wonderful last bit where Apollo actually kind of calls out the gods, and he says, your standards are even worse than human standards, right? You deny the simplest decencies to Hector when he's been such a good guy his whole life. So if anything, Hector is like above the
Right, morally below.
Right, yeah, he's the exemplar
Interesting.
that even the gods have to look up to.
Thanks for saying extra. I appreciate it.
No
Professor.
worries. Good to talk. All right.
Have a good one.
See you on Monday, right?
Yep.
All right. Night.
Looking forward.
Take care. Looking forward. Okay, signing off then.